Thank you very much, everyone, for attending our webinar today on Anwar States of the Nation, 6 Elections, 1 Future. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the lands on which we are all dealing in from today. For me, the voluntary people of the various nations and recognize the continuing connection to land, water, and communities. I pay respect to elder past and present, and to all First Nations people whose land we will discuss today in this webinar. I would like to invite you all to submit your questions throughout the webinar in the Q&A box, and they will be answered at the end of the sessions. Today, Kian will be our moderator for the discussions. Kian is a Sydney-based Malaysia journalist and editor who worked on Malaysia and Southeast Asia for the past 30 years. He has also written about Southeast Asia politics and culture for various books and magazines, and is the editor of Rebirth, Reformacy, Resistance, and Hope in New Malaysia. I hand it over to you, Kian.
Thanks a lot, Jenny. And welcome to our Asialink seminar about the last weekend's big Malaysia state elections. First time, I think, in a very, very long time that state elections have mattered so much. There were 6 state elections. And as our title suggests, are they all hewing towards one future? I suppose that's something we hope to discuss today. We have with us various experts on various aspects of Malaysia, but I hope that all of you watching this can also contribute to the conversation and send in your questions. We have Professor James Chin from Universiti Tasmania, Dr. Wan Rohila from Terengganu. Are you in Terengganu right now?
Yeah.
Yes, you are. Great. Dr. Pauline Leong from Sunway, and Washlia Naidu, who is the director of the Center for Independent Journalism. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for participating in this hopefully very enlightening discussion about trying to explain various aspects of what is still, for Malaysia, a fairly new, barely 8-month-old environment of a unity national government. Yet, how do these state polls matter? I'd like to start with perhaps James to give us an outline of what is going on. Then perhaps we will go to Wan Rohila in Kuala Terengganu to talk, and then Pauline, and then Washlia. And then maybe we can go to a few queries and questions amongst ourselves, and then we can open it up to the floor and take your questions, and we can hopefully have a fairly relaxed but informed discussion. James, would you like to start?
Thank you very much, Kin. So thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this webinar. So what I'll do is I will very quickly go through with you and the audience what I think are the key aspects of these 6 state elections. I think the first point is that despite it being a state election which has no direct bearing for the federal government, most people in Malaysia and most of the polity and the voters took it as an indirect referendum on the Anwar Ibrahim administration. So this was quite clear. You can see this clearly in the way the campaign was referred to. Anwar was the poster boy for the government, or the unity government. And on the other side, interestingly enough, it wasn't the leaders of Perikatan. It wasn't Hadi Awan or Muhyiddin. It turned out to be Sanusi, the Menteri Besar of Kedah. These were the poster boy. But in any case, it was widely seen as a referendum for the Anwar administration. I think the second thing that we need to note was that very early on the Perikatan side at least, on the opposition side at least, it's very clear that they were looking for a repeat of the Green Wave. So even though they don't come out openly to say that, you know, we want a repeat of the Green Wave from GE15, it was very clear the whole entire machinery, the whole messaging was basically a repeat of what they did in GE15. The third point I want to make was that there was basically a lot of talk before the election. The thing that really got people's interest was 2 issues. The first one was vote transfer. There was a lot of talk about whether those people who voted for Barisan / UMNO are willing to transfer their vote to the wider Pakatan government, the unity government. The second big issue people are talking about was the turnout rate. So I think in terms of the vote transfer, it is quite clear from the early raw data I have with me that vote transfer did not really happen. Those people who voted for UMNO did not really transfer their vote, or if they did transfer the vote to Pakatan Harapan, it was like, 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 maximum. Majority of them actually transferred their vote to Perikatan Nasional. In terms of the turnout rate, I'm not surprised that the turnout rate was smaller than general election. It was widely expected, but it actually wasn't too bad. I mean, we saw a turnout rate about 70% overall. So that's actually not too bad for a state election. I think the fourth point that I want to make was that I think people were also being a bit unrealistic about this election, simply because I think this election was held simply 8 months after the general election. So I think there was a strong element of voters fatigue about it. I mean, you hear this all the time, and also you saw it. I mean, in the first week of the campaign, right? Everyone was telling me it was very cold. In other words, nothing was really happening. So I will put that down to voters fatigue. I think the other interesting point number 6, is that social media again play a very crucial role in this election. You can't run away from it. And what was very surprising to me, at least, was that the key lessons learned from social media in GE15, especially as it refers to TikTok, it looks like the unity government did not really learn the lesson, because in this election, it was quite clear to me that on the Perikatan side, they did a repeat of the TikTok thing in GE15, and they again dominated the TikTok space. I think the next point I'd like to make was that I was very surprised by the results in Terengganu, and Terengganu now has no opposition. Now, if you had asked me before the election, right, which state would be a total wipeout for unity government, I would have said Kelantan easily, for the simple reason that a lot of the UMNO people I know in Kelantan have deep roots in Kelantan, and yet there was a total wipeout. But that's not the only total wipeout. There was no more UMNO represented in Kedah as well. And from last election, there's no UMNO represented in Perlis as well. So that is really a sort of a watermark in Malaysian politics. I think the other thing we need to note about this state election was that almost everybody got it right. I think the general consensus before the election was that it was going to be status quo 3-3, with Perikatan making some inroads. I think the big issue was how big was the inroads, but I think everybody under the sun, or anybody who's credible, said that it was going to be 3-3. I think the final point I'd like to make is that the results are very similar to GE15, and that we have a highly divided country in Malaysia today, because the two most successful parties in this election is again the DAP and PAS. These are the two parties with totally different versions of what they want for Malaysia. Again, they are the most successful in terms of the winning candidates. And this was exactly the same results that we saw in GE15. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, James. That's a nice overview. Dr. Wan Rohila, it would be great to hear your insights, given your vast amount of research, actually, and you live in what now is considered the heartland of the resurgent opposition, Perikatan Nasional.
Yeah, thank you, Ken, and my respected viewers. Okay, basically, for the introductory part, the green wave, especially in Terengganu and Kelantan and parts of Selangor, it is already expected. It is clearly showed during the last GE15 last year, where PAS penetrated into its peculiar states. PAS made inroads to Perak, to Melaka, to Johor, which was peculiar before. So that was the first hints of the green wave. And for many political observers, what happened in November last year, was expected to continue until the state election, and that was proven. What we call, basically, I can conclude that all Malay majority seats basically PAS simply won. In Selangor, all Malay parliamentary majority areas, passed 1. Malay Dons, Malay State Assembly area, passed 1, including Penang, all the 3 Malay parliamentary areas, including former Anwar Ibrahim's Permatang Pau, passed, took them all. So I think my observation so far, this could not be taken easily. This is something serious, and the current unity government should not take this as something temporary. Okay, my next point is renowned politician, either from Pakatan Harapan or UMNO, lost in the last state election. And newcomers, amateur candidates, like the former footballer who just had, SPM, the typical school level certificate, won, not only winning the election, he won big. And few candidates with less traction suddenly won and defeated the giants. So this is some also we touch on this after this. And then before the election, a few pre-election surveys already detected this trend. But what was PMX or Anwar Ibrahim's reaction? He simply said, especially the survey or the findings from Ilham Center, Anwar simply gave spontaneous comments. This is a cacat survey. Cacat means, what is cacat? How to put, this is the
faulty, a faulty
okay.
survey.
We cannot trust the survey. The survey is what we call bias. And he always quoted, I followed a few Anwar's campaign. He quoted the survey by IDE, the Selangor's research center, from UniSZA, and the survey was definitely, a bias to the unity government. And I think Anwar Ibrahim was a bit, slack at that particular point. And then people are talking about, is this a referendum? Muhyiddin Yassin on the dot, okay, asking Anwar to step down, asking a few ministers like Rafizi, Saifuddin, okay, to take responsibility over the results. But I think if we are talking referendum in terms of political sign, this is not the referendum, because the popular votes is still with the Pakatan Harapan, with the unity government. So I think the current focus is not on the referendum, but we can say this is the strong signal given by Malay voters towards the unity government. That's all from me, Ken.
Great, thanks, Rohila, for these insights. Can I invite Pauline for you to tell us a bit about how you saw last weekend?
So I think that for the first time in recent history, Selangor is having its state elections separately from general elections. So previously, right, I felt that candidates for the state assembly could go under the radar because the focus was on candidates for parliament and on national issues. But in a state election, the spotlight is on state matters. And from my observation, the performance of incumbents in the state assembly are being scrutinized. So local issues came to the forefront first. Initially, the development issues in Penang and Selangor in the early days of the campaign. And I observed also that voters at first were a bit confused why they had to vote, again, since they voted the last election. So perhaps some of them felt that there's no necessity to vote because, there's a federal government form. So why do we need to take leave, and come back and vote? So the early days, like what James said, early days was very quiet, but the momentum picked up in the second week with the MPs and ministers coming alongside and campaigning with state candidates. So that's when national issues came into play. And from my observation, there was obviously, for Pakatan Harapan, they viewed this as a referendum. They said that there was a pitch. The pitch was that, okay, let's support our unity government, support us. Voters were asked to defend the state governments from falling. there was some fear mongering, for example, if you want to wear shorts, you better vote for a certain party, a certain coalition, right? And of course, for PN, they portrayed themselves as a champion for the Malay Muslim community, identity politics was a strategic campaign for them. And they also criticized the unity government for associating itself with, graph-tainted UMNO. Well, we have to talk a bit about MUDA. They basically challenged these political giants by introducing new candidates who were, basically newbies. They had to hit the ground running, to introduce themselves to the new voters, to the voters in the constituencies. Well, I think that while they leverage on social media, the outreach is still limited because people don't know them. There's still, Syed Saddiq is the main person. These are the new people, and that's why, they did not perform as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Pauline, for reminding us, I guess, that, yes, these were state elections, not federal. And that was some of the root of the confusion. And I guess it backs up one Rohila's point, that it's not necessarily a referendum. Can we move on now to Washlia from the Center for Independent Journalism, who had been doing some data collection and surveying over the issue of hate speech and, in a way, how the broader media, social media landscape was being harnessed and compared, and I guess in comparison to what happened last November's general elections 15 and last weekend with the state polls and other insights, I guess. Washlia?
Thank you, Kian, and thank you, everyone. Well, it was really interesting for us as part of our monitoring to see how the narratives actually played on very critical themes that we are all very familiar with. I think most of us in Malaysia, we grew up in grew up seeing many attempts to divide and polarize our society, using common language terms. 3R is the term that we are all very familiar with: race, religion, and royalty. And what we saw in the course of our monitoring, when we did the GE15 monitoring, these were definitely the focus, right? The narratives always focused on upholding certain religion, attacking another political party on the basis of their race or religion. So it just kept repeating. Yeah, same pattern we saw during the state election. But and that's where I think sometimes the similarities starts and end. The topics, the issues were the same, right? Race, religion, royalty. The platforms perhaps may have varied, like even in the past, it would have been solely focused on Facebook, Twitter to a large extent. But then G15, they completely leveraged TikTok. I think the attempt was to hit the Undi 18 voters, or primarily younger voters. And they were extremely successful when they did that. And they continued the same pattern this time. What we thought was very interesting was that they balanced the use of both Facebook and TikTok. So they had almost similar content and across platform, but of course the reach were completely different too, because a Facebook, say one of our actors may have about, say, 200 followers, 2,000 followers on their account. The same person, actor, may have a TikTok account where the engagement level for similar content could go all the way up to 1.5 million. Yeah, so that was the distinct difference in how they were amplifying the narratives and the messaging, and the reach is beyond what we would have heard of in the previous elections. The actors were also, again, it was similar. It was politicians, political parties, but more and more what we are seeing are key opinion leaders. The influencers are becoming part of the political act. And that we saw a rise of that in G15, and the same pattern continued here during the state election as well. So while the poster boy for G15 may have been Hadi Awang, and I would agree with James, definitely this time for past, it was Sanusi, but they had also leveraged other celebrities. G15 was Jamal Abdullah, Zul Huzaimi, who were coming up with very concerning and alarming statements, to get voters to vote PAS and PN. And the narratives also, although they were focused on race and religion, it's also taken a slight shift, because what we saw in G15 was an attack, say, for example, against DAP as being, secular, pro-LGBT, communist, and so on. Whereas this time, the shift was not so much, I mean, yes, the targeting of, DAP targeting of PH continued, but the messaging changed a bit. It was, let's protect Malay rights, and it was like bangkit lah orang Melayu. Let's protect, Islam is under threat. So it was shifting a little bit. It's not new, as I said, but there was a slight shift in the way the attacks were amplified as well. And and religion is always tied in with race. The moment it's Islam under attack, look at PH. It's too multiracial, and who's going to be controlling the economy. And that's the way it's all packaged as a kind of a formula that seemed to have worked. Of course, we also saw royalty being pulled in, but very subtly this time, I would say. The last time the issue of royalty really came up post-polling date, where, PN was at times classified as being disloyal, to not being part of the unity government. This time, the target, however, it was more tapered, but it was Sanusi's at times, being called, his act being called out as treason and so forth. So there was very little social chatter, I would say, around royalty, because there is real fear as well in terms of what you can and cannot say around the issue of royalty. Now, some other very interesting things that we noted was the use of coordinated inauthentic behaviors, the bots and cyber troopers. It was not as evident as in the past, right? Now, cyber troopers are almost acting similar to, humans. You don't even know if the photo is real or doctored or anything, because it's sometimes using, real photos. But we still saw patterns of the same messaging, not just keywords, but phrases and sentences, So there were these actors being, used as, again, tool to amplify some of the messaging. Back to the question of the role of social media again, we note that TikTok it's definitely the space for a lot of these conversations, and we also note that how it was used last year with the threats of May 13, right? Even especially post polling day. Similarly, this time it was used, in various kinds of threats. There were still some images of weapons being floated around, but what we saw is the speed with which some of these posts were being taken down. If you note now, kafir harbi is actually a term not even allowed. It's seen to be associated with harmful content. So if you do the search, it's TikTok has banned it. TikTok's also blocked some of the accounts, not indefinitely, but I think for a short period of time. So what I would say is, on one hand, yes, James, the government, the PH government had not leveraged social media per se, but I think on the other hand, they have been having a number of conversations with social media platforms, especially TikTok. And I think what worked in their favor is also, I think, how somehow they were able to, I don't want to say that they were able to influence TikTok, but I think TikTok was well aware of what is happening. And the government definitely benefited in the speed with which a lot of these contents were being taken down. Right. One other thing we want to talk about is how the war plan that PN had during G15 really worked for them. But the war plan, aside from celebrities and influencers and key opinion leaders, had young content creators. So it wasn't just Adia Wang on TikTok or other videos on Facebook and so on, but they had most of the videos that we see, especially those around May 13, and even recently about Bangkit lah Melayu, and post-polling date is Melayu Sudah Bangkit, all right? With all these hashtags, they're young content creators, right? And of course, some of these content creators, they were also, content coming out or even allegations being made that they are paid. But in fact, there were even some content which had paid partnership. So this is the new tactic that is working. You want to reach the only 18 years young content creators, but it also, of course, opens up a huge other can of worm, what kind of protections available for young content creators and how impactful they are. I think that should be our next research, like how these young content creators are really impacting or influencing the understanding of the youth. The other point, I just want a quick point that I want to raise is the issue of elections fatigue is actually real. Yeah, and a lot of people who went out to vote had it was slightly different. Like G15 people wanted to vote because we wanted to have a say in terms of our government. This time they were really afraid because it's about protecting their rights as well. Yeah, it became my choice of government is very closely linked to either one, my race, yeah, and my religion. It's less so, I would say, in terms of maybe urban areas would have had a lot of non-Malay Muslims who were probably voting out of fear that past government would then erode some of the basic rights. So there was a lot of playing with emotions that worked. So despite a lot of people not wanting to vote because of the elections fatigue, people did go out to vote. And one example I would give is like in Subang Jaya. I had a lot of friends, family members, even my colleagues telling me 8:30, there's nobody around. 10:30, not many people around. And they started literally amplifying this message saying that there's not enough people. And then you got the voters coming in. Yeah. On that note, I'll just stop for now to say that some of these things have worked, and potentially could work if we don't really deal with it effectively.
Thanks, Washlia. Got many themes and topics to follow up, I think, on this. I was seeing one Rohila nodding enthusiastically on some points, which I think I can assume now, where I'm going to pursue some of the questions that she should hopefully answer as well. I think, first of all, one thing that we all sort of have hinted at but haven't really addressed, which might be something that both James and Wan Rohila initially could try and address, is James, you talked about how, this is 8 months into the good old unity government experiment. And of course, the critical partner in this has been UMNO, which has been really decimated in these state elections. They didn't do very well federally either. Now, it's actually got worse. So, and you were saying that one thing that has happened is that it's not much vote transferring has happened. A lot of, especially in Malay majority seats, as Wan Rohila points out, vast majority votes went to Perikatan Nasional led by PAS. And these are areas which people were quite surprised, shocked at in the elections last November, the federal elections, where UMNO did so poorly and PAS emerged as the victors in areas that had never happened before, what were traditional UMNO strongholds. So I was just curious to find out from both of you, what do you think is behind this shift of allegiance, almost so comprehensively, actually? What has made this sentiment so deep in the Malay Muslim majority areas? Either James or Wan Rohila, you could start.
Okay. One, I'll start first. So for me, right, if you were to ask me to explain, I'll basically say that there were three factors that was going on concurrently. The first one is that you need to look back. If you look at UMNO, say from 2008 onwards, right, their numbers of vote share has been going down consistently. So this is a one-way trend. I'm talking about the longer trend. So I think to expect UMNO to sort of suddenly reverse the trend, I think that's a bit much. Secondly, I would say that another big factor was the Zahid factor. Zahid's name is really not good in the Malay community. And I think if you speak to especially younger Malays, I think the attitude is, or my impression of the attitude is, people always widely understood that Zahid comes together with big baggage, and that baggage is Najib. So it's sort of a combo thing. So I think that turned off a lot of people. The third factor I would argue that on the other side, on the Perikatan side, I think they was extremely successful in painting this unity government as, Anwar Ibrahim being controlled by the DAP. And even the people I speak to, right, they keep repeating one thing which is factual, but is not grounded in reality. It's factual in the fact that the DAP is the largest bloc in the Pakatan government, but it's not factual that just because you have the largest bloc, you control the government, because the DAP, in fact, only have, like 1 or 2 ministers in the federal government, and they did not receive the bulk of the political appointments. In fact, the bulk of the political appointments, interestingly enough, right, actually went to UMNO. So I think if you were to combine these three factors working together, that would go a long way in explaining what happened to UMNO. I think the other side issue with UMNO was that, again, like I said, this thing just have a very strong deja vu for me with GE15. If you remember GE15, right, one of the reasons why UMNO did so badly was that they replaced a lot of the highly experienced election people, right? They put in a lot of new candidates. They remove a lot of the so-called old warlords. Now, I agree, those people may not be good for the future of UMNO, but those are the people who knows how to bring the voters in, right? They know how to manipulate the local people to go out and bring all the old people to vote and all that sort of thing. So in this election, interestingly enough, Zahid did the same thing. He replaced a lot of the older, true and tested UMNO people and brought in a lot of young people. And I was told that same mistakes were made. These people really could not hit the ground running. So basically, it's a combination of the three big factors plus the internal problems that Zahid was facing. That would, for me, would account for the bulk of the reasons why I'm not lost so badly. One.
Thanks. Yeah. One, Rohila, it'd be great to hear from you about whether there really has been a fundamental cultural change and the moral outrage from last November over corruption actually, ironically, might be the great success of Reformasi over 25 years, hasn't it?
Yeah. So thank you, Ken. So basically, when I disseminate the conference poster to my friends, so they jokingly said, "So you'll be defending PAS. You'll be the only Malay defending the green wave to the." They said to the liberals presenters. Okay, so that was the earlier perception I received. Okay, so my friends, they are educated, but they regards the faces on the poster as the liberals academicians. So so I carry a very big task. Okay, so basically how could PAS did so well? Okay, let me explain. Okay, because I studied PAS and my PhD is on PAS. So PAS, people ran away from PAS due to takfiri culture. Takfiri culture means if you are not with PAS, you are considered kafir, or you are considered infidel, or you are out of Islam. Okay. Basically, the takfiri culture, TAKFIRI, the takfiri culture had divided the society, had divided the people in Terengganu, the people in the village, until it led to they were praying in different mosques. Basically, they were buried in the different cemetery up to that extent. And the wedding, if they were witnessed by the UMNO ustads, it is considered illegal. They had to remarry up to that extent. Okay, and it led to Mamali incident and so on. So PAS, the young faces in PAS realize this. If we stay with the takfiri culture, we will not. We does not mean me. Okay, that means PAS will not go anywhere. So they came up with budaya politik matang sejahtera (BPMS), and they introduce the combination of technocrats and ulama, so-called ulama. For PAS, once you came back from Al-Azhar, you are considered ulama, okay? You are considered ulama. A very simple definition of ulama, and you are simply called ustaz, okay? So the budaya politik matang sejahtera reduce the glaring takfiri in PAS, the glaring one, but the spirit of takfiri is still there, was still felt in the last state election, when the first statement by PAS leader after they won big in Terengganu is, thank you, you have voted for the Islamic government. You have voted for the Allah's government, something like that. Okay, this is the literal definition. Translation. So basically, taking Terengganu as the case study, each UMNO and PAS, they have 20% of grassroots or staunch supporters. UMNO 20%, PAS 20%. The other 60% are undecided, the fence-sitters, which they voted for UMNO sometimes they voted for PAS, but due to the developments after GE 2018, okay, with the domination of DAP, with the statements, remarks, okay, by YB Teo Ni Ching, the efforts to change this, change that, reduce this, reduce that, okay, it hurt the Malay fence-sitters voters. So basically now the 60% of fence-sitters voters, the number is getting smaller, because now they are becoming the PAS staunch supporter. That's how I see. Okay. These PAS supporters, do not get them wrong. Okay, they are not pious. Okay, they might not be praying, my friends. Okay, they are watching TV, they go to cinema, they are not that pious, because PAS supporters now are different with the PAS supporters in 1970s, okay, the pious one, okay, who reject development, reject establishment, okay? They go to the mall, okay, but they are seeing if non-Malays, especially Chinese, can unitely vote for DAP, why not us? I'm talking on behalf of the Malay voters. Okay, we also can form our strong group. Okay, a strong coalition by voting for PAS. Okay, previously, my dear viewers. Okay. During election, near to election, the Chinese overseas, okay, from UK, Taiwan, mainland China, from Singapore, they came back, okay. They spent thousands of money for flight tickets and so on. And if you remember, last near the election, Sanusi called, hey, all the Malays outside, come back, okay. The money will be granted, will be rewarded by Allah, okay. If the flight tickets from Paris cost you maybe 10,000, 10,000 is small compared to, you know, retaining the Muslim government, retaining our government. So we could see from the TikTok sharing, we could see from you know, Facebook storytelling, okay, they took 2-3 days, okay, to travel back to Terengganu, to Kelantan, to Kedah, just to retain the so-called our government. Okay, but I think a few political observers, including a few politicians, they have done something wrong by simply saying the Malays were quote unquote stupid. The Malay voters were anti-establishment. They don't want development. Meanwhile, the Chinese were considered sophisticated, were considered democratic, were considered politically literate because they voted for Pakatan Harapan, they voted for DAP. The Malays, when they voted for Pakatan Rakyat, the Malays, when they voted for Pakatan Harapan in 2018 election, they were praised that way. So this time, when they unanimously voted for PAS, they were considered backward, anti-establishment, leave them. So this blame game is very dangerous for the current unity government. These statements are making them fairer, okay, to PMS government, okay. And how could PAS win the hearts of the Malay voters? They are very active. Where? In the mosque. Okay, maybe non-Muslim friends, you do not know that between the Maghrib prayers somewhere in at 7:30 at night and Isha prayer some 8:30 something, there is 1 hour, and PAS will fill the gap by with pro-PAS ustads or Islamic preachers with short 1 hour kuliah or short Islamic religious what we call sharing. Okay, they read the Islamic books. Okay, and that caught the hearts of the Muslim, because while they are reading the kitab, while they are reading the what we call the books written by Muslim scholars, they will relate to the current situation. See, Al-Ghazali said this, then they relate to the current situation, and the Malay voters were attracted to this. Okay, and then I also can say the education system planted by PAS, the PASTI, the what we call the Islamic primary school, secondary school, now they are bearing the fruits. Okay, now the kids now they can vote. Okay, and they were being taught that they are the future generation of Islam, and what you call the future of Islam is in their hand. Okay, and then our friend has touched on social media, so I will not be touching on that. Anwar Ibrahim realized that there is a loop, okay, between the unity government and Islamic preachers. So he brought renowned international preachers, famous international preachers, but that lost touch with the Muslim voters on the ground. Because that was held in Putrajaya. They speak English while talking about Islam, the popular one. Meanwhile, PAS was supported by famous local celebrity preachers, Ustazah Asma Harun, Nur Hafizah Musa, Ustaz Wadi Anwar, and my friend. They had more than 2 million followers online. And every morning they have live, what we call live, religious circle. So whenever they read they talk about Islam, they will relate to the current situation. So if I every day been feeding with those information, I might be voting for PAS as well. Okay, and then what we call, they also played a few sentiment. Okay. Look at Penang, okay? Malaysia will be the Singapore 2.0. What happened to our supremacy, our land? Okay, so those typical issues. Okay, but even though it sounds funny, it sounds simple talking about land. Who is going to take our land? But manipulating the story, making the story, the narrative interesting. So it just won the hearts of the Malay voters. Okay. So basically, I could say from my circle, okay, this is the personal experience. From my circle, educated one, they are teachers, they are engineers, they are what we call IT experts, lecturers. I can't say 100% of them voted for PAS in the last election. They are not wearing the big tudung. They are not properly covering their aura, but they voted for PAS. Not because they like PAS, quote unquote, simply said they like PAS, but because they are left with no choice. Voting for Anwar means voting for DAP, and DAP is the ghost now. Okay, how should we vote for a ghost? Okay, so there is no choice left. Okay, so in the next general election, if the current government can offer a better alternative, a better choice, PAS will be PAS will not be the main choice. That's for me so far. Ken, thank you.
Thanks, Rohila. That's very useful for us to talk about, and I think confirms many of our own anecdotal research as well. I think it makes a lot of sense. The issue of, I guess, a community's pride or marwah being a key factor in some of this. And of course, going back to, yes, how successful PAS and Perikatan have been in showing Anwar is compromised because he's in coalition with DAP, who is the ghost or the hantu or the monster, I suppose, the monster that has to be expelled, I suppose. Could you elaborate a bit about how you think, Pauline and Washlia, this is actually seen very differently in those urban areas and urban seats, given that even there you would have had a swing in several of them to Perikatan National, albeit I notice a lot of those urban mixed constituencies that Perikatan National won often 1,000 votes or less.
Okay, maybe I'll start. If what the one says, the ghost is TAP, right? So in the urban areas, PAS is therefore the other side of it, the flip side, the ghost. In urban areas, there's been a lot of fear mongering. We also must protect, the state government, because this is the fundamental liberties, the right to be able to dress the way we want to dress. Yeah, that was one of the key factors that played into the emotions. Yeah, so I totally agree. Emotions, it's become very emotional rather than logical. The fact that you want to wear shorts, was a key factor. That has been brought up, amongst the circles that we've been talking about. Yeah. So, but I think that for some of the seats, the seats that flip to PN, there's a lot of online chatter blaming MUDA for the splitting of the votes, because they felt that these votes could have actually gone to PH to win the seat. So, so I think that for these seats, right, MUDA did attract some voters who were not entirely happy with the PH administration, but then this is part of the democratic process, that anyone should be able to contest and any party should be able to contest. So I think there's a lot of blaming and scapegoating post-elections, to these results. And I also think that, some people have been talking about Undi 18, and they felt that maybe Undi 18 and the auto registration, that the youth would lean towards more liberal values or ideology, but it's clear that the results of G15 and of the state elections is proof otherwise. And interestingly, this morning, I just received a video about somebody who's advocating for the reversal of Undi 18 to Undi 21. I don't think that is politically feasible to do that, because if PH actually did that, it would give ammunition for PN to argue that you're trying to change the goalpost to secure power. So I think that perhaps in terms of the youth vote, there is a need for more political education and literacy, so that youths are able to critically discern the political messages for each election, so they're less acceptable. But then again, right, based on what Dr. Wan has said, if they have been already been going to schools, etc., it's going to be pretty hard to change your mindset. So I'm not sure how it can be done, but I think that there needs to be maybe more critical discussion, to see what's happening out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. Washlia?
Yeah, just to add on a couple of things. I think one thing you can see very clearly with PAS and PN was that they had a consistent messaging across board. The terminologies might change, but their messaging was very clear. You have to protect your rights and your religion, right? Across board. And that was the same issue that was used over and over again, and it was tied into every other issues, corruption, even REE in Kedah that became an issue raised by PH, then got linked again to race and religion as well, right? So that consistency helped, because then you were not contradicting each other, or you were not saying different things to kind of divert people's attention. The difference with PH was that there wasn't necessarily a consistent messaging that was going out to everyone, right? And the challenge here was because there was no consistent messaging, and it meant that the Chinese were not necessarily hearing what they wanted to hear. The Indians were not hearing what they wanted to hear, right? The Malays, Malay Muslims and the others were perhaps hearing what they wanted to hear from the other side, right? So that then really again polarized the voters. So in the urban area, I mean, one group that we always forget is the Indians, all right? And most of the discussions amongst the Indians were happening on WhatsApp and not necessarily on all the major social media platforms. Now, in the WhatsApp, you get these things about, how PHPN is being racist, and, it might affect us. But on the other hand, what PN did was they co-opted Malays and Chinese as well. If you look at candidates, there were, Indian and Chinese candidates, right? And they were also, they had influencers. Even yesterday, there was one video of an influencer in Kedah, Indian woman, saying that I've now, gone to the temple, to thank God for the success of PAS in Kedah, right? So they've managed to even, their war plan really targeted everyone. Whereas here, the Indians were mainly reacting to Anwar's, the incident at the matriculation in Penang, where Anwar had put down a student who had raised questions about quota. Now, it brought back to the forefront issue about quotas and issues about affirmative actions which were discriminating particular communities. So that was the discussion which was happening in the last week of the campaign period, and nobody was necessarily, from the PH side addressing that. It was literally, ignored after that whole incident. So it was happening some level on, say, for example, the X or the Twitter, but it was happening on WhatsApp amongst, the same races. So the lack of consistency in approach, a lack of common messaging really divided the people. But also, I think we need to rethink how PH brings people together because of how it portrays itself. But again, the strategies need to be coherent and consistent in that messaging that it's multiracial. Yeah.
Thanks, Washlia. I think we should try and get to a few of the questions that we have coming in. I was curious, maybe, well, one of them is actually directed to Dr. Wan, and to see whether you could help expand it a bit more as well in collaboration with another question, which really is related to this. The question to you, Dr. Wan, was from Lee Yun Pok, that what is the cause of this, what is, I guess, the root of this strong religious beliefs in PAS supporters, that they are motivated by, for instance, the Kedah Chief Minister Sanusi was saying about defending Muslim governments. I suppose the broader question is about this way that politics has been framed almost entirely on racial religious grounds, and the enemy is seen as ungodly, right, as you were saying, and how the fruits of that coming off the Undi 18 reforms, which brought down the voting age to 18 and automatic registration, making it a lot easier, is a whole new influx of millions of new voters, has also meant maybe a younger generation schooled in and bearing the fruits of what you were saying, the past education system.
All right. Thank you, Kian, and our friend who asked the question. So, for some, Sanusi was seen as a clown, but for Malay voters, Sanusi was regarded as the warrior. Okay. And what made not only Kedah, I think what made Kelantan, Terengganu, and Kedah past one big because of the simple action or policy taken by the three states. Okay, for example, they closed the gambling center. So the Malays, they were so proud with those closing of the gambling. They forgot that people are now doing online gambling, which cannot be closed. But that became the main campaign of PAS. Even though during their 33 months of under Perikatan Nasional, they increased the gambling from 4 to 8, but people, basically the Malay voters, they wanted to see with their eyes, okay, the Sport Toto shop close, okay. That was so simple. The business should be stopped during Friday prayer. So all business, all malls, all shops should be closed for about 1.5 hours. So it is simple, but for Malay voters, it showed government's dedication, government's willing, what we call government's priority to make sure all men go to Friday prayer. And then so with all these small actions plus the factors that I mentioned during the first round of the webinar, they simply close their eyes on many what we call below performance in Terengganu, Kelantan, and Kedah. Okay, the water problem, everybody knew. Okay, the water problem in Kelantan. Okay, the water problem in Terengganu, in Kedah are very glaring. So people, the voters simply close their eyes. The waste management, the rubbish were not collected for 2-3 days. Okay, and imagine this happened in Selangor. Oh, okay, the mismanagement of waste. Okay. Slow economy, low KDNK, what we call no jobs, okay? The business is running very low. So basically the voters simply quote unquote forgive the Terengganu, Kelantan, and Kedah governments because of the sentiment, because of the simple action of closing the what we call the gambling center, because of the issue of we have to retain our land, this is our land, this is our dignity. We are going to be Singapore 2.0 if we do not vote for the past government. So it may sound simple. That's why people say Malay voters are simple-minded. No, this is nothing to do with simple-minded. We are in war, and you are feed with those fear-mongering things. So I could not blame my Malay voters friends. Okay, and then PMX he realized this, so inviting the famous Muslim preachers wearing if you notice PMX wearing the traditional baju Melayu almost every day to capture the Malay hearts. Okay, he went live, he broadcast where he is going to pray Friday prayer. Okay, on every Friday we are going to see. Okay, Dr. Anwar, he's praying here, okay, but everything was seen in sincere acting, temporary. Anwar is what we call very excellent actor. He dance and he pray. Okay, in front of Chinese he danced, in front of Malay he prays. So the Malay voters saw Anwar as the man with two faces. So how could we vote that kind of Muslim moderate. For Muslim voters, Muslim moderate. For Muslim voters, there is no moderate. Okay, there is no Muslim moderate. Muslim moderate means Muslim liberals. Okay, so those are things that maybe a few non-Malay friends might not understand. Okay, thank you, Kian.
Thanks, Dr. Wan. I guess it's very interesting because from what Pauline was just saying before, and Washlia as well, clearly there is this not only, I guess, racial religious divide, but also an urban and outer urban divide as well, in terms of understanding it, but also in terms of how effective, I guess, Perikatan Nasional and PAS has been in honing and staying on message and keeping that social media campaign very efficient and lean and on target, as opposed to much harder, much more diffuse, more messy, I guess, messaging that Anwar Ibrahim's unity government has to take into account in so many areas. I guess I was just trying to get to what you're trying to say, Rohila, I suppose, is there is also the prevailing lingering issue that if practical good government doesn't quite happen, it is a lesser issue than having what these Malay Muslim voters would consider a moral government, a government that fits a particular morality. And I'm just wondering, how does a unity government then try and reconcile what many people say is the urgent need for Malaysia to work out a better economic future and to try and implement actually some tough economic reforms for that, versus trying to address those issues that you're saying that the Malay Muslim voters are prioritizing?
All right. Thank you for the good question, Ken. So before I give the floor to other friends, basically is Terengganu Kedah Kelantan moral government. So that is very subjective question, but for Malay voters, this is so far the best that they have. Okay. I don't say that I mentioned just now they are not the pious Muslim, but simple action closing the gambling, okay, is considered better compared to the unity government. So I answered the question. I continue answered the question from our friend on hudud. So with 32-0, okay, no zero opposition in Terengganu, so will hudud be applied? 43 versus 2-6 in Kelantan, will hudud be applied? So I already asked the question to the second people in PAS. So hudud so far is not their what we call their ultimate what we call policy, okay? Because now they said the people from Bersatu might not agree with hudud, okay? So hudud is what we call past what we call long policy, but currently, and I think for this term there will be no talking about hudud, but they might put some reforms on Islamic what we call Sharia courts that is under their jurisdiction. So they will improve on that. Okay, and talking about moral or immoral government, for example, in Terengganu, in Kelantan, you cannot wear your outfit cannot should be, you should follow the Sharia one, but how to put into words, okay? You in public you are not allowed to wear the tight attire. So our friends might say, are they going to be the Taliban state? No. But how to put into words? Okay. People cover their head, but Islamically, it is not. This is not according to Islam, covering the head in a wrong way. But we could see improvements, okay, in terms of quality of life. For example, in Terengganu, in the context of Terengganu, where the crimes is reducing. You couldn't see couples, okay, in the what we call couples walking together. So something that we it's hard to see. So for fan-sitter voters, this is what we want. This is what we want. And you could see 2-3 days after the state election, many Facebook posting talking about are you proud of the development in Selangor while you are your house in on the 33rd floor, you have no land, okay, you don't know your neighbors. Meanwhile, the people in Terengganu, Kelantan, you have a very big land, you know your neighbors, you are happy, no traffic jam. So people simply twist the story that way, okay. So that is number one. So far for Malay voters, voting for PAS in Terengganu, Kelantan and Kedah is the very best and right decision they have made. Okay. And Malay voters in Selangor, if you could see the comments on Facebook, they cannot wait, okay, to feel the same. To feel what the voters in Terengganu, Kelantan, Kedah feel, okay? We, the Selangorians, are eagerly waiting the next 5 years, okay, to enjoy what you are enjoying now, okay? Something like that, okay? This may sound simple, but if this does not take into is not taking seriously, so it is dangerous to the current government. My next point is last state election, the unity government maybe strategically they took wrong strategy, I might say, because they campaign on development. Meanwhile, the past leaders, they simply what we call counter the allegation by saying during Pharaoh's time there were developments. Okay, the pyramids, okay, there were developments, okay, but there was no bless from God. Is that what you want? So okay, so people will shut down and okay, so this might not be written on academic paper, but this is what I saw and what my friends who voted for PAS feels. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rohila. So many issues there that we would love to discuss some more. I think we're sort of running short on time a bit and trying to get across a few more issues. And James, you have a few points, I guess, in response to make to this?
Yes, I think all the discussions are very valid, but projecting to the future, I think what is very clear in all the things we've discussed, we're actually discussing identity politics. I think all of us on this panel know that, you know, this misconception that PAS supporters are very pious. I don't think any of us have actually believed it. I think what PAS is doing and Perikatan is doing is that they're playing identity politics to the hilt. They have created a new Malay identity. Previously, right, up to the, say, mid-1990s, I would argue that the sort of Malay identity you want to create was Ketuhanan Melayu. Now it's Ketuhanan Melayu Islam. So they managed to merge Islam into the part of the Malay identity. I'm talking about politically. So I think going forward is quite interesting that one actually is actually quite hopeful that you know that the other side, as in the unity side, has a chance. But if we assume that the identity politics will get stronger and stronger, especially among younger Malay youths, then I would argue that the so-called green wave that we saw in GE15 will only get stronger in GE16, because if you look at all the options on the table for Anwar Ibrahim, things like moderation, economic growth, inclusivity, all these things are not part of the identity politics on the other side. because as I mentioned very early on, one of the reasons why it is so difficult to sell anything to past supporters is that they counter the thing with the DAP as the boogeyman. So as long as DAP is there, I don't see how you can move this messaging forward. Because at the end of the day, right, the difficulty faced by Anwar is quite straightforward. Because if you play this identity politics, then you alienate your core supporters, right? Your core supporters is the urban non-Malay crowd. But if you pander to the non-Malay crowd, your urban supporters, then you lose the identity politics argument. So what do you do? I mean, he's sort of between a rock and a hard place. So I think it's extremely difficult. But the thing that really worries me is what I said in the introduction. It seems going forward, we still haven't resolved this issue of what Malaysia is. Because now the divides are very, very clear. You know, the Muslim community, for whatever reasons, you know, they see Malaysia in a certain way. The urban non-Malay population has a vision for Malaysia, again, totally opposite. Then you have the third vision. Don't forget, the people from Sabah and Sarawak also have a different vision for Malaysia. So really, going forward to GE16, if we are still gonna, you know, sort of circling around the issue of identity politics, then I'll be quite happy to make a prediction that, you know, PAS will be the big winner. Sorry, PAS and DAP will be the big winner come GE16. You know, we're back to square one, because, you know, I don't think it's possible to reconcile the sort of identity politics currently being subscribed by so-called PN supporters. I don't think under that version of identity politics, right, there's space for anybody else. Thank you.
Thanks, James. And of course, amongst all of that, the great undercurrent is that Malaysia is in a region facing some rather urgent challenges, from the climate emergency to various economic reconfigurations, including a sliding China economy, which is beginning to affect Malaysia, and of course the diminishing fossil fuel, oil and gas bounty that has fueled so much of Malaysia's development. But as you've suggested, Dr. Wan, development or economic development isn't the issue of a great number of voters. And it's even seen as a negative, I suppose. But I'll be really curious to know, how do you then end up funding or paying a lot of what constitutes the Malaysian economy? I wondered whether we could see if we could get to a few more of these questions. I think we have one where we're trying to look at the implications for the next general elections, which are not due for another 4 and a bit years. And James has already touched on that and defined it along identity politics versus the much messier inclusive politics that I guess Anwar has to somehow straddle. I wonder how you see it, Pauline and Washlia, because I think there was a question also to Pauline about, you know, a so-called third force of youth voters of the Youth Party. And of course, youth voters, perhaps unlike Thailand, are not necessarily progressive in that traditional way. They might be actually more conservative. Pauline?
Yes, correct. For the youth voters, right, when I was debating with my students, you know, discussing it, and when Uni 18 was being introduced, interestingly enough, you know, a lot of them are actually quite conservative in their thinking, right? And they feel that there's not enough political education, and which is why you see a lot of people, youth being influenced by what they see on social media, rightly or wrongly. Okay, so there is an issue of, you know, political education and political literacy. To the question about, you know, whether MUDA would actually, you know, take bring in some Malay youth votes, I think that The problem with MUDA is that it's pretty much focused on issues rather than identity politics. So when you talk about issues, right, you need some sort of level of ability to understand and ability to sort of like understand the issues. And if you're going to campaign on that, it's going to be pretty hard to bring voters to understand your point of view. So I think that's where, MUDA, while they're trying their best, they have not been able to be successful in that because issues are complicated, issues are difficult. And moving forward to G16, I think that one possibility of trying to reduce the race and religious rhetoric is perhaps the ability to redelineate constituencies. Now you have constituencies that are very Malay majority or, and they're not multiracial enough. So if perhaps, to address the issue of malapportionment, you will have more constituencies that are multiracial, then politicians will have no choice but to campaign on a more multiracial approach rather than relying on identity politics so that they can reach out to more people. But then again, of course, this is mainly in the West Coast area, in the East Coast area where majority are Malay Muslims. I think that is not possible. But in the areas where there are more multiracial, then perhaps we can have that because politicians are just, trying to win the votes. And if they are in an area where there's a strong, larger ethnic majority, then they would, of course, say what needs to be said to get the votes. Yeah.
Thanks, Pauline. I suppose the thing is, we are in a way talking about the practicalities of trying to address the long-standing problem of the electoral shortcomings and imbalances that really are decades old of malapportionment and one vote not reflecting, one person and so on across the country. But I suppose broader than that, from what Dr. Wan was saying, what James was saying as well, something that perhaps Washlia can do a critique or comment about is that we really are getting down to this issue of what it means to be a Malaysian nation, right? So where the messaging and the rhetoric and the articulation here of what Malaysia is or can be or is already or should be is the one that is in contest here, right? And does Anwar Ibrahim or PMX, given he's got about 4 years left, can he actually articulate that? Does he have the courage of his convictions, perhaps, to talk about a type of Malaysian nation that can include everyone, including Sabah and Sarawak, which he relies so much on for his political, sustainability?
This is a tough one, and I'm also asking myself, how honest should I be? I think there are two challenges here. One is the biggest thing is PH needs the next 5 years to even demonstrate the fact that they are able to do this, and I'm very hopeful that they have these 5 years, right? Because the challenge of this 5 years is going to be immense because you are not really countering questions around development and things like that. You now have to counter and diffuse the fear mongering that's happened, right? You're addressing fear. The whole narrative has been around that. So their action now will have to address on one hand, the issue of economic reforms, right? Development in terms of employment opportunities. And if you're speaking to the youth, they are also, they need to address the issues around high cost of living and so on. So while you're doing that, you have to address the 3R issues, or at least the race and religion issue. Now, to do that, is Anwar able to do it? If he has the 5 years, hopefully, his unity government will be able to help him pull this through. But on the other hand, and this is a difficult one, we have to always remember Anwar's also coming from, at times, the very conservative background, right? And now he's, of course, putting on the reform hat, right? So he's got to be able to balance both as well. And this is where I think it's going to be difficult because who is he speaking to, right? Is he speaking to, again, as what you said yourself, Ken, is he speaking to his voters or is he speaking to the non-voters? So that he needs to be very clear about how he's going to be approaching this. And, the unity government as it is, hopefully is actually going to lend power to what he is going to be able to do it. But the problem here is the root cause. We are not addressing the root cause of this very polarized nation that we are living in. You asked the question about Malaysian identity. When I was younger, it was very simple. It was the food, our neighbors, our friends, right? We had so many different things in common. But why is this identity losing its powers when we are in Malaysia, but still holding strong outside Malaysia? When I'm outside Malaysia, I'm always a Malaysian. When I'm in Malaysia, I'm first and foremost suddenly an Indian, right? So we need to really go back and address the root causes, because all this while, it's politics that's really been playing this game of dividing our nation. And politics happen every other 5 years. So what is it that you do within the 5-year frame that's going to matter? So to answer your question, I think it's going to be possible if the reforms are clearer and speaks to everybody, beyond the race and religion issue. At the same time, he needs to ensure that the alternative narratives which are being put forward addresses all, not just the issues, but addresses all races and religion in a way that it's not focused on fears, but really about building bridges and creating a society. And I know this sounds a little bit idealistic, but I think it's going to require some level of challenging our education system and really going beyond media literacy. Digital literacy is critical, and being very consistent in how he approaches this. And he needs to get all the parties in the unity government together and be consistent. And one thing he may consider is, I don't know, maybe form an alliance with PAS and bring them into the unity government. And what would that mean then to the nation is something that we should ask ourselves and be prepared for as well.
Thanks, Washlia. We need to sort of wrap things up. And I thought perhaps the final words, very briefly, if we can, looking forward to the next 4 years, could come from Dr. Wan and Pauline as well, about, where exactly are we at? Perhaps Pauline could start and Dr. Wan can give us a projection of whether there is a Malaysia outside of the past vision.
Okay, just to pick up on what Washla was saying, there needs to be building of bridges. So looking forward to the next general elections, I think that on the ground, there should be more conversations between people who are voting for PAS and people who are voting for DAP to understand the concerns. Now, from the urban non-Malay perspective, we are trying to figure out what exactly, PAS voters are actually voting for, and to be able to understand each other, that would be a step forward. And for also, PAS supporters and voters to understand the concerns of the non-Malays, and the non-Muslims, why are they so fearful about all these things, and I think that if we can build the bridges, then there will be more understanding and there'll be a way forward to this. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. Dr. Wan, you close the session.
Thank you, Ken. So I think number one, since Prof. James mentioned just now, later it would be DAP versus PAS. So for sure, DAP friends, okay, engage more with Malay voters. I think YB Stephen, YB Howard Lee, YB Anthony, they have shown the way. So and I think the old DAP warlords, okay, they have basically retired. So the young faces in DAP now, I think they started to blend well with the Malay political culture. The same goes to PAS. I'm calling my PAS friends, okay. The old thinkers in PAS, they should retire and give away to young PAS leaders. And both parties, because DAP and PAS, they were once together, and now they are criticizing each other. So basically, they can be together if there is a very big and sincere political will. But it needs time, and we pray for the better Malaysia. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Dr. Wan. Thanks, Washlia, Pauline, and James for participating in this webinar. We will, I think, share the details. I believe there's been a lot of traffic and viewership actually on YouTube, and this ends up turning up on YouTube as well. Thank you for all your questions as well. Hopefully we've managed to cover as much of the questions and grounds as possible. And thanks to Asialink and the University of Melbourne for enabling and hosting this webinar about the 6 states of the nation and perhaps one future going forward. Thanks for all your participation, and over to Asialink for them to shut it down.
Yes, so this section will be uploaded on Asialink YouTube. So please stay tuned also for our upcoming webinar as well. So for today, thank you everyone, and hope everyone have a lovely evening. Yeah, bye.